Okay, as we're looking at the Illustrator exercise document, if you're working in Adobe Illustrator, we have 4 pages to work through, and we'll just start at the top. If you have used this program before, just bear with me, work through some of these things to shake the cobwebs off. It never hurts to refresh skills or just reinforce things. There are a few quick keys, and any sort of quick key is in parentheses if it's relevant to the particular tool. Pressing V on your keyboard, nothing else, just press V, will give you the selection tool, and A, just pressing A on your keyboard, will switch it to the white arrow or the single selection tool. And what that does is let's unlock this layer for a second, it allows you to select an entire shape. So I've got this entire hexagon that I can move around, or with the white arrow, the A arrow, I can just select one point on that structure. Command G or Control G if you have a Windows, that groups objects, so it links them together. So if I wanted these two objects to be together as a unit and not move relative to each other, I would select both of them. So click on one with the black selection tool, press Shift and click on the other so that they're both selected at the same time, and then Command or Control G. And that, even if I click back on, now it's selecting them both at the same time. They move together relative to each other just as a single unit, which is nice. Command copy, Command paste, that's the same. Command Z, undo. So you saw me as I move this stuff and do all sorts of weird changes. If I want to undo that, I'm just pressing Command Z, Z, until it gets back to the original state. Save, just Command S. You want to hit that periodically no matter what you're doing. There are features that save, recovery files and things, but just in case, you always want to be saving so that you don't accidentally have something shut down on you or press close and then there's tears. So let's start with the shape tool. We want to click and hold. We'll bring up a menu. If there's any of these little arrows at the corner of these toolboxes, clicking and holding will bring up the options. So we have rectangles, rounded rectangles, ellipses, polygons. We're just going to use a couple. And we are working on the red layer. Blue layer is locked just so everything down here stays in place. Red layer we are going to be actively working in, and I'll talk about layers in a little bit. So I'm clicking and dragging this square. I want to make sure it's black. So if you click and drag that square, or the rectangle, it just gives you a nice little shape. You can rotate it, you can resize it, do whatever you want. It's good to practice recoloring these structures, so you can do that either down here or up here. This is our color palette, just generic color palette. If you need to add more colors, you can go to the swatch libraries and find a whole bunch of different color palettes that are all preset. You can add colors individually, or just say, I like this folder of colors, I'm going to add it. So you select a folder that you like and then add 2 swatches. And when you look underneath your swatches, underneath this tab, you will have a new folder with these new color palettes that you enjoy. So let's make that interior a green. Let's make that outline purple. Whatever you want. So now go back to the shapes. Do the same thing with the ellipse. And as you are stretching your ellipse, it's going to be variable shapes. If you press Shift, that will make the circle perfect no matter what size it is. So I'm holding down Shift and dragging to get this circle. And I want it to be different colors. You do not have to have an outline if you don't want. You can, in fact, just nix it. So if you have this very first square here is none, so that then you'll just have a circle, a plain circle. with the inner filling. You can have the same thing if you want to have the outer, you just want to have a stroke around the outside, you just want to have the line but no filling on the inside so you can see through it. You can make sure that the interior is selected none if you so choose. Polygon, I don't anticipate using this a ton with the work we are going to do, but if you are doing honeybees and you want a polygon background for honeycomb, the automatic polygon is a hexagon, which is kind of cool. You just click, I'm holding down with my tablet and then dragging out to increase the size of this shape. And if you did want to have like an 8-pointed structure, you click once, and then you select the number of sides that you want. And it's very small. Make it bigger so you can actually see it. There you go. And that's something you can also go back and modify it after the fact by clicking on your shape and going up to our little shape designation and say I want to have 1,000,000 sides or I just want to have 3 or whatever. So this is a tool for making equilateral shapes. So now the pen tool is here. The options under the pen tool are adding, deleting, modifying anchor pen point tools, but we'll just use the regular option right up on top. So the pen tool is it takes a little bit of getting used to, but if you just click, let's make that black again. I'm going to make it a little thicker just so it's easier to see. And instead of black, I like green, so I'm going to do green. So click once, click. I'm not holding or anything, I'm just clicking and moving to recreate this line as a practice, and it's a little bit off, it's fine. And then here, so that's fairly simple. You're just clicking, making straight lines. For this, to get a smooth curve, when you want that curve to be part of your line, you hold and drag to create handles. So just looking here, if you have a curved line, these handles are what designate the angle of the curve and the steepness of the curve. And to get those, you click and drag. So let's get our pen tool. If it's still connected up here, just use your V, the selection tool, click off of it. So I'm clicked on, clicked off, so that it deselects and we can start fresh. So click, I'm going to click and drag to right here, to this circle, and lift my pen, the tablet pen, and then click once, click and drag, and that's just to make this like zigzaggy curly loop, the click once part. You can continue to click, click, drag, and click. I'm going to press V and select, so I'm free now, but if we press P for our pen tool again, you can continue to click and click and click and click and do whatever you want to make an amorphous shape or some other custom structure. Get rid of that. So let's try something that's a little bit less conventional. Whenever you're looking at to recreate a curve, you want to aim for about the middle of the curve so that your handles and your angles are not doing as much work. So that was the middle of the top curve. Let's look down towards kind of the middle of the next curve. Click, drag, and you're clicking and dragging and angling until your lines match where you want them to go. And now we're looking for the middle of the next curve, maybe a little bit before. Click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. It's variable. And off. You don't have to get it perfect. This is just kind of an experience in using that handle function. The lasso tool is definitely helpful in some cases. So say that I wanted this loop to be further away than the others. I can use my press A, get my white arrow selection tool, and then hold Shift as I select the structures that I want. Or I can use Q, the lasso selection tool. So we click off. The lasso selection tool will select any points that are within this area of definition. So it did. The only thing you have to remember then is to press A to actually move those tools. Otherwise you're just lassoing, lassoing, lassoing. So Q to lasso, A to move them. And that could be a way that you can perhaps move a leg further away from a body without having to redraw the whole thing. You can also use these handles and anchors to modify shapes. So let's just put a regular circle and use our A. So I'm just going to press A and move these points inward and move the handles. You can just barely see them there. Move the handles at an angle to create kind of a light bulb shape. The pencil tool and the blob brush tool, pen is really great for consistency and for smooth lines, doing things like large arcs that you want to have a very smooth, consistent line. The pencil is N. If you just press N, or if you find it over on the menu here, I think it's second down underneath the shaper tool, so you might see this. So you have to click and hold and go down to the pencil tool. This is a drawing tool, actual drawing, which is really nice. It can give you a lot of flexibility with these vector programs. So I'm just using my tablet. Oops. Let's make our stroke thinner, and we'll just do this one in black. And it gives you these places to get that hand-drawing feel into your vector design. And notice that I'm going every other. This is fairly sensitive, so it's for modification. If you have an object selected and you want to adjust, say I wanted that to be a little closer to the line, you can redraw over that part of the line and fix it. You just have to be careful not to, you can't just leave it off hanging into space here. You have to reconnect. You have to reconnect with the line to make it part of that shape. Otherwise, you just get kind of a weird hanging off. Essentially, it converted a closed shape into something that's making a loop-de-loop. So it's starting here, going around, and continuing here. So it's just this kind of a weird thing. If that does happen, there's redo. If that does happen, you can adjust it by looking at that place of misalignment and reconnecting it to smooth it out. But you don't have to get too fussy with this, it's just for practice. So that is the reason I was doing these little segments every other one, because if I just go straight on, that's going to confuse the pencil. Well, sometimes. Sometimes it'll confuse the pencil and it'll turn it into one shape, and that can cause problems for future editing. You know, how it combines them, it thinks that you're trying to do a couple things. And from there, you can keep on going. Here, this is one case too, where this pencil knows that I want the line to go this way, but if I make my other stroke here, it's going to think that I'm modifying this line. So to get items to join artificially, you draw it from, you have to click off of it, V, N, and start again. So it's a separate shape overlaid on top. So do half of this ant, just tracing it out. It doesn't have to be super precise. You're just getting used to the feeling of having that pencil tool and that sort of more organic flexibility. I would hold off on drawing the little CD. We're going to talk about stroke profile and look at ways that that can be a little bit easier. Because if we draw the CD now, they're just going to be little blocks, which is, not super hair-like. So looking at the CD, notice how the CD are tapered. We want them to, the CD are the hair-like structures on insects. They look like, they're downy fuzz. There's a way that you can get something that looks a little more tapered and hair-like. So let's look at these few sparsities actually down here. I'm going to draw them away from the body. Just a few little separate things. Not that big. And then just a few here. And we're going to look in a minute at the stroke and profile. So these are going to be here waiting for us when we do that. But in the meantime, the blob brush is Shift B. That's more painterly. This is a very common for what Marvel comics are now illustrated with. People will just immediately make them vectorized so that they're easy to resize and you don't have any image quality loss. And this responds to the pressure of your pad. But it'll do sometimes it'll get little blocks in there. And this can be really, really blobby, really big. But if you press the bracket key, just get up here, the bracket key, so the left side will make you smaller, the right side will make you bigger. And zoom back in on our drawing. Smaller. Make a few test swipes. So if you're really light, you can get really fine, delicate lines. More pressure obviously will make thicker lines. Make this just a little smaller. And so this gets a fairly expressive look. It is more difficult to correct, so it doesn't behave in the same way that the pencil. So if I made a bump on the eye and I wanted that to be smaller, I can't just ooch it in. I have to erase. So Shift E, erase it down. Shift B, draw it back in. If you still have some little bumps there and you want to correct them, so if we look at these two eyeballs together, we have the pencil, which is a line with a thickness around it, a stroke, and the blob brush actually creates shapes. So every line that this pen, the blob brush pen, creates is not a line, it is encompassed by the line, which sounds a little silly. But you can go in with your pencil tool, say I don't want that dip to be there, and adjust it with your pencil tool. Just like you adjusted your pencil line, you can adjust the lines that are outside of this shape so that you can have some flexibility there. Now with the blob brush, now you can get these really fine hair-like structures already if you so choose. Sometimes when I'm trying to lift, like I am with a pencil, we try and lift as you're making the stroke to get a finer point at the end. with digital, sometimes it's easier to go in the opposite direction, where you're soft and then thicker, depending on what feels best for your hand and your pen control. If there's something that is not connected, so if you make a little stroke that's not connected, you do want to make sure that it actually has some sort of tether to your shape, so it doesn't get lost if you move this shape and it's not connected. Say, move this over. Sometimes little unconnected pieces can get lost. So the blob brush, if you just kind of paint it on, so with that, we want that circle behind there, but you know, it's kind of wibbly. Maybe we want a more perfect circle. So let's use our shape tool, put a circle behind it that's about that same size. You can use your arrow keys to nudge it up and over, resize it if you need to with your black selection tool, so the V arrow, the black arrow. And you get it about the same size as that wibbly hand-drawn circle, which, you know, wibbly can work depending on the aesthetic that you're going for. And then we are using the cut tool. So it looks like a little scissors. The cut tool is under the eraser, C, but if you just press C, that will give you the scissors that you're looking for. So I'm going to cut it. Yes. Cut it so that that little segment that is interfering with the ant design is now gone. Same with on either side of the leg. It can be close, it can be far. It's not really one issue. So I'm just tapping and tapping, and that's creating this little separate segment that can then be deleted. Let's get that segment out. Press C to get your cut. Grab those little sections of circle, get them out of the way. You may see me doing a double delete, and then there's two little ends left, and delete. So now it's completely gone. If those two little ends are still left in there, it's not a big deal. You won't see them ever. It's just something that shows up in your layers, and you wonder, what's that little dot doing out in the middle of nowhere? And let's get rid of these guys. Cool. And there you go. Oops. Ants. Cool. So yeah, that's blob brush, more painterly, pencil, a little more forgiving with correcting lines, and a very consistent line. So it's more like drawing with a brush or a nib pen, or like a flexible pen, versus a technical pen like the microns that we have. Great. So let's say for this area, we want to make a colorful circle behind the ant. So let's select with the black arrow this entire thing and get rid of any stray marks. So you can just click select, but sometimes, like especially with the pencil lines, they are not all the same shape. Blob brush, you'll get the same shape mostly, but we'll just select the whole thing, and I'm holding shift and clicking on these parts of the circle so that I'm not taking the circle, I'm just taking the ant. Copy, paste, and nudge. If I'm nudging just with the arrow, it goes slowly. If you hold down shift, it will go faster. And now let's put a colorful circle behind this ant. Draw your same circle. except we have one problem. I'll do green because I like green. Yes, there's a bit of an issue. This is in front of the ant. So what you want to do is select, there we are, Object, Arrange, Send to Back. So Object, Arrange, Object Transform, Object Arrange are very useful. Send to Back. That way, you have something behind your drawn structure, and you can maybe make it a little bit more transparent if you want. So 50% opacity. Let's get that color tone down, and just play with things there. You can use the pencil tool, the pen tool, shapes, whatever you want to create some type of logo. And, oops, there we go. If you do find yourself, sometimes if you double click on something, where it was in this sort of grayed out zone, you find that you can't click on anything that you want to click on, and your options aren't here, and you can't do anything. Check at the top of this screen to see if you're in this weird isolation layer, where it's now I can just really interact with this one thing that I've clicked on here, which I never use and I hate it. It does it all the time. So just click that back arrow until everything's normal again, and now you can actually interact. So we're just going to do a quick insect logo. Like I said, you can use shapes, you can use pencil tool, pen tool, blob brush. Let's do pencil. No. So you can use a combination of shapes. Let's just start with a slightly thicker, couple of basic insect shapes. Squash your head a little bit and say, just like we did on the other page, we want to manipulate some of these so that they're a little bit squishier. A little bit more organic feel to our ant here. I don't know why ants, I should have done a beetle. And let's give them some mandibles, an antenna, nice little elbowed antenna because it's an ant, and legs. But we're only doing those paired appendages on one side, because what we're going to do next is part of the joy of a bilaterally symmetrical insect, so the insect that looks the same on the right side and the left side. Hang on. That antenna's a little weird because it was hooked up with the mandible. Cool. From there, we can mirror these. So I've selected all the things that are just on one side that I want to transfer to the other side. You can copy paste, or you can hold Option, Control, Shift, drag. That's a lot of coordination of buttons. So copy, paste, and let's put them over on the other side of the insect, but they're not flipped yet. You can flip them manually and kind of estimate, or you can do Object, Transform, Reflect over the vertical axis. So Object, make sure they're still selected, Transform, Reflect over the vertical axis. So now we have an identical set of legs for the other side. You can modify them so they fit where they're supposed to if you need. There we go. Now these little sticks are fine for logos. They're a little awkward. So what we can do is change look at the profile and look at the weight, the caps, the profile, to make these a little more than just straight lines. So we can, over here, we have the weight. We can make them thicker or thinner. We can cap them so that those little ends, let me do that again, if we cap them with circles, those little ends won't be as abrupt. And if we make the corners, look at this sharp corner here, has a very sharp sticky outy part. If we round the corners, that will make that a little nicer as well. If we do that on the, keep those mandibles in there too, rounded corners, very nice. So then we still have a uniform profile down here. We can make them go from thicker to thinner. And oops, it's the wrong way. We want them thicker towards the bottom. Actually, that looks kind of cute. So you can leave it that way. Or you can reverse it, and the reverse button is just on one side of the profile button. You can see that some of the options up here as well, but this little reversing button is going to be in the main stroke menu. If you don't see the main stroke menu up, you can bring it up with Window and Stroke. You click on it, and if it doesn't have a check mark, click on it so that you can see it. So if we want to reverse it, then we have ants with thicker outer antennae and thicker base of their legs tapering out. Kind of cool. So I'd like you to play with a few, just make a few simple arcs. So I'm clicking and holding and dragging to make one arc. Thank you, Lee. And then you can copy, paste, or Command, Option, Shift, drag down to get multiple copies of a similar line. And each line, make it look like something different, using all of these potential options. So you can make your line thicker, you can add arrowheads to one side or the other, where you have huge arrowheads. It's really important to pay attention to this. 100% is always too big. So maybe make it 50% or even a little smaller, 35. Oops, not 350. Something like that. So arrows we'll be using in a future thing. You can make the profile tapered like that. Let's make that a little bigger so you can see that difference. Tapered is quite nice. Up here on the demo here. Most of these, some of these, like, you wouldn't necessarily be using in the same way. So imagine this is a hair on an insect. That's always very useful. We can go back up to our pencil drawing insect and take a look there. And dashed lines are always great. So dashed lines, if you want them to be further apart, you make this number, larger. Or if you want them to be closer together, you can make this number smaller. And if we zoom in, notice these are capped. And this is a 3 pixel dash, 3 pixel gap. If we want these to be short like this but further spaced apart, so just play with the dash and the gap ratio. So it's just pushing them apart a little further. And if you do not want them to be rounded, you can have uncapped lines. So make sure that your cap is either at the end point cap or projecting cap where it's squarish, and then you get a square dotted line. So play around with a few of those options. So if we have our little pre-CD here, our little drawings, and we want to change their profile to be that wide at one side, narrow on the other, that can give us automatically some nice little insect CD. So it did that weird thing because I had selected them with the white arrow and I should have used the black arrow. So now we can move those and get them where they're supposed to be on the leg. And they're kind of cute. You can mess with this all day. All right. So there's a couple different ways you can make text boxes. This is pretty quick. So you can click And if you click and start typing, you can adjust any of the text field, any of this text adjust in the character menu. You have a few options up here like font and weight and size, but the whole smorgasbord of things that you can adjust are here, so like spacing and kerning and whatever. But let's not underline this. But so this box then is adjustable, and it will squish and squash the text itself, as opposed to a box that you draw. So this is a click text box, this is a drawn text box, and I'm drawing it out to a certain shape, and I'm just going to go typing a million times. So when you adjust the size of this box, it will modify where the text is laying. So it's acting more like an InDesign or layout box instead. Layers, this one, it's just kind of telling what you were looking for in this layers profile. Now the worksheet is locked here so that nothing below gets moved. You can feel free to unlock it and mess around with whatever you want, but the working layer is always highlighted in blue. If we want to turn that off and get rid of the new things that we made, you can turn that off and on again. And if you want, so locking prevents changes, and if you wanted to select everything that is included on that layer, so I've selected the entire red layer, and now I can either manipulate it or find something that I thought that I'd lost, or whatever. And if you wanted to create a new layer right down here, it'll make it above the layer that you are currently on. And you can adjust, if you double click on it, you can rename it and give it a certain color profile. There you go. And delete. When you're aligning structures, let me unclick here. Just click off to not be highlighting. Options for alignment. And this can be used for different images. These are all aligned, distributed. So if you have some things that you want to be in a clean row or a nice row, use your alignment tab. And if you don't see it back here, you have some options up here, but not all of them. So window, align will bring that out for you, because we want to have our distribute spacing options as well, which don't show up on the upper menu. So we can align them vertically or according to like the bottom line. And then distribute spacing, here you can play with this in a number of ways and a number of applications, but that's kind of how you manipulate things to be what you want. For linking the images in your file, before you export anything, before you export your PDF to show your lab PI or your client or whatever, or your students, you want to click on your links and make sure they all have this symbol beside them. If they don't, that means this is not linked and it will not show up to whoever is trying to look at it. If you have multiple things selected, it won't give you the option because some of this one is embedded, so it's messing up that. Window, links, and let's see what we've missed. And it looks like there are two ways you can embed things. So if I notice here, this image has a blue X over it, or a colorful X over it. So I can click on it and embed up here, or you can find it in your links menu. This one is the layer button over here. So you can find it in your links menu and embed images. And that will fix it for you. So as soon as everything has has that link symbol, you are good to go. Last but not least, in Illustrator, there's a feature called image trace, which sometimes it saves time and sometimes it can cause you a little more grief depending on how clean the image is and what application you need it for. So this was the pen drawing of an ant. And when you select an image that has been imported you have the image trace option. So click the arrow next to it to show all of the different options for image trace. There is the regular option, so just default. The program will make decisions based on what it thinks that you want. The sketched art, we'll take a closer look at these in just a second, is also pretty successful with imported drawings like this, where it's pen and it has a fairly high contrast, light background, dark lines. Pencil will not have as good of effect necessarily. Line art, it tries to do like a pencil drawing, like we used the pencil tool to make a drawing. This does a similar thing where it makes lines that can be modified with different strokes and whatever. It takes a while. And that turns out interesting. And then silhouettes. There's other options for colorful drawings, which, it's kind of interesting. So let's take a closer look at these that are from a fairly high resolution image. Default did a pretty good job. If there are any areas where you do want to make corrections, so like this area, there's a bit of, I want that to be cleaner, you can expand this. Right now this is just an image, but you can expand up here, or you can go to Object, Image Trace, Expand, and then use your pencil tool, to adjust some of these lines to make them look a little closer to your original. Cool. I accidentally pressed F, so it gave me a slightly different workspace. If you do find yourself like, oh no, where's my tools? Everything's gone. Press F again, and it'll bring you back. So if we zoom in close on this sketched art, it's a little bit bolder, but pretty good. Pretty good. The lines are a little thicker. I mean, in certain cases, you can definitely use this. If you expand this, notice that line, it's a line going through the center of these dark images. And if you wanted it to be a little finer, you can reduce the stroke. It ends up looking a little better. But it doesn't have quite the same effect as something that is drawn. This is maybe a little bit more like blob brush in the effect, because the lines themselves are composed of shapes. This is as opposed to lines that are lines with a stroke on it, like we're used to drawing with the pen and the pencil tool. Line art. Silhouettes, it's a little scrappier, so if you want sort of a hazier look there, to keep that hand-drawn quality, is kind of neat. So we can also if you use a low resolution image, you're going to have a very different experience. So if we image trace, you recognize, the program recognizes that it's a lo-fi photo, it's going to do its best, and you can get something that looks pretty cool. If there's something that's a little more crystallized, or same image, let's try silhouettes. That can give you something pretty neat. If you're doing something graphic, that can give you a really beautiful effect sometimes. So it doesn't have to be super duper high res or anything like that. So try comparing pencil tool and pen tool or blob brush, any two of the three main objects that we've tried so far, and trace this fly wing. And again, make sure that you're in the red layer and this layer is locked, so you don't accidentally start moving around this picture, which is maddening. So lock the layer that your picture is on so I don't do any issues. And let's do pencil tool to start. And if you start drawing with the pencil tool and you don't see anything, you want to make sure that you have a color in your stroke, and that will help things. Keep on going like that. And this is a little bit more about the long, smooth areas where the pen tool, in some cases, might be a benefit. Because I know sometimes it's like, why even bother? But if you have this really smooth wing, you can really have a lot more control over the look of it. with the pen tool. Click on that to make it not go haywire. If you click on the handle, so this all of a sudden it's like everywhere. But if I just click, it's kind of like a reset button. It keeps my curve over here, but I can start fresh here. Cool. And so keep on going with that and compare how that feels and how it looks for a wing, which is a little bit different than drawing a full image. So I hope that was a useful introduction to some of these techniques. Thank you very much. See you in the next one.